Unveiling the incredible journey, the hidden truth behind Julius Caesar's amazing rise and fall. Claire stared at the cover of the old manuscript, the ink still swirled beneath layers of dust, promising a glimpse into history that had been buried for centuries. A relic so potent it could turn the tide for her career, yet the thought sent a shiver down her spine. Was this the breakthrough she longed for, or just another trap set to ensnare her? The paradox prickled at her mind as the specter of expectation loomed both from her colleagues and her father. In the hushed twilight of the library, shadows draped around her like a second skin. She could already sense the hungry eyes of her peers, their anticipation sharper than the old parchment she held. Do I dare? The question echoed against the silence, clashing with the insistent reprimands of her father's voice. Her colleagues thrived on flamboyance, while she struggled for the validity of quiet scholarship in a landscape drenched in superficial accolades. Recognized for her thoughts. Or forgotten like echoes in a cavern. Dread coiled in her stomach as she thought of her father, standing resolute with crossed arms, disapproval etched on his face. To him, success equaled recognition, and her pulse quickened. If he knew about this manuscript, would he see it as a vehicle for leverage? Wouldn't he? His voice return, the weight of his ambitions colliding with her morals. She was just a figment in his grand political narrative, a reflection of rigidity that stifled her spirit. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue. As her fingers danced over the text, the breadth of Caesar's ambitions screamed at her: leadership, betrayal, consequences. Did he pay the heavy price, or had he willed himself into greatness? That realization came like a blow, revealing her internal conflict. Ambition glared at her, demanding she wrestle with its heft. It was the key to free her from her father's shadow but also the very chains that bound her conscience. Just when the horizon seemed to brighten, Daniel emerged. He dazzled everyone with earnest debates, pulling her into discussions that felt electric. Their friendship flickered with challenges that echoed deep-seated desires for validity. Yet, as it blossomed, Claire felt the pull of ambition storming through her veins, battling her conscience with each shared laugh. Would she trust a bond rooted in authentic connection over her lifelong pursuit of recognition? The turmoil escalated, and Claire's breakthrough morphed into a mounting dread when her journal submissions vanished, pilfered by a scheming colleague eager for the limelight. The betrayal cut deeper than any criticism from her father. This was her life's work, her very essence. Voices of doubt rushed in, her heart thundered beneath layers of dread. To reclaim that work could mean the loss of everything: her ideals, authenticity, her precarious bond with Daniel. In that moment of mind-bending turmoil, Claire questioned her values, her commitment to morality battling the enticing allure of justice. It was unclear if she had the strength to expose the injustice, but as the shadows grew longer, the decision loomed closer. Claire stood at a crossroads, fear coiled like a snake in her mind, waiting to strike. Would she remain the overlooked specter of academia, burdened by her father's expectations, or dare to unveil a truth that could shatter the facade built on jealousy and ambition? The uncertainty felt all-consuming, hovering like a storm ready to break, leaving her breathless and teetering on the edge of her own narrative. As dawn broke over the library, the golden light slipped through the tall windows, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air. Claire's resolve wavered like the rays on the floor, flickering and uncertain. She trailed her fingers over the manuscript's cover once more, feeling the rough texture against her skin as she battled conflicting waves of hope and anxiety. Time pressed on her, urging her to make a decision. What would it look like to stand up for herself? Each moment without action felt like an erosion of authenticity. In stark contrast, her ambition, a whisper growing into a roar, called for her to fight against the betrayal, to reclaim her stolen work with both hands. Could defiance pave the way towards becoming the scholar she desired, known for her integrity rather than her father's connections? With every tick of the clock echoing through the cavernous library, nostalgia tugged at her remembrances of late-night studies fueled by her dreams, the intoxicating possibility of truth as a catalyst for change. But alongside those fond memories loomed the specter of her father's disapproval, ink-stained in her mind by years of expectations. She desperately wanted to mold her own narrative, but the solid image of her father's frown remained definitive, the unyielding gravestone bearing witness to her childhood aspirations. Restlessness surged within Claire. She found herself heading toward the bustling common area of the university, where her peers often gathered in passionate debate. Today, silence draped the usual camaraderie, as she passed glances, some curious, others dismissive. Yet, amidst the chatter, she noticed Daniel animatedly discussing theories with a group gathered around him. His enthusiasm illuminated the room, and the thought of him brought warmth to her frigid uncertainty. But the flicker of their connection felt tangled with the harsh reality of her fractured work. She ambled closer, her heart beating a frenetic rhythm against her chest. As she inched toward the circle, doubts ricocheted in her mind. How would her peers react when she aired the theft? Would they view her as a victim or reaffirm her father's perspective of her as an incompetent? Claire. Daniel's voice waved her closer. We were just talking about Julius Caesar, and his capacity for self-reinvention seemed like a perfect parallel to your current struggle. His eyes sparkled with accessible warmth, an inviting beacon pulling her toward him. For a moment, Claire hesitated, entangled in the tendrils of his energy. Was this the right time to disclose her heart's turmoil? She could feel the manuscript weighing heavy in her bag, a subconscious whisper questioning whether she dared to reveal it. Instead, she took a deep breath, the fresh air filling her lungs like validation. Daniel's gaze seemed to cut through her anxiety, asking her to share. Actually, she began, testing her voice. I've been wrestling with some ideas stemming from an ancient manuscript. She could feel the energy shift, her peers leaning in as if grasping for an elusive thread of knowledge. Yet the decision grew weighty in her throat. Would she share the injustice of her colleague? Or would it finally embolden her, claiming the thrill of unveiling her intellectual property? Each hesitation felt seismic, building toward an eruption of truth or silence. Clouded by indecision, she pushed through the turmoil, envisioning stepping off that tightrope, clinging to a hope for clarity. A dark thought entered her mind: if she hesitated too long, her work could fade into obscurity, stolen without consequence. And then it hit her: this manuscript was not merely text, it held possibilities. Opportunities for her truth to flourish unfettered by influence or opinions. Maybe it was time to confront her colleague, fight not only for her work but reclaim her very essence. I have something to show you all, Claire said, standing taller. The resolve washed over her as she pulled the manuscript from her bag, its pages whispering untold stories that she wished to resurrect. The room fell silent, the atmosphere thickening with anticipation. Even her uncertainty started to dissolve, replaced with determination. The journey had only truly begun. She was ready to unveil not just history but an emerging version of herself. The dawning of her own truth shimmered ahead. Would they accept her revelations, or would it deepen the shadows cast by betrayal? The doubt still lingered, yet she now saw a flicker of light at the end of the tunnel, and it bulged with the weight of potential. Her heart raced with the audacity of possibility, knowing she stood on the precipice of defining her narrative. The hinge of fate swung upon her next move, and with each heartbeat, she prepared to confront the whirlwind that awaited. Would her emerging identity withstand scrutiny? Would their reactions push her toward greater ambition or deeper despair? The moment stretched, overlaid with anticipation, as she prepared to dive into the depths of her story. The air in the room crackled with tension as every pair of eyes locked onto Claire, anticipation hanging thick around them. Suddenly, she felt a surge of empowerment rush through her. The manuscript was no longer an object of dread, instead, it transformed into a beacon of her burgeoning identity. As she opened it, the pages fluttered like the wings of a bird on the verge of flight, ready to soar into the uncharted skies of her academic reputation. While researching for my thesis, I stumbled upon significant insights, Claire began, her voice trembling yet resolute. Insights that challenge our understanding of historical narratives, especially those surrounding Julius Caesar. The name hung in the air, and she could almost feel Daniel leaning in, eager to absorb every word. Claire's mind raced, a million thoughts colliding as she recalled the layers behind the manuscript. The betrayals it encapsulated mirrored her struggle within her field. She meticulously outlined the contextual framework of her findings, emphasizing how Rome's politics played out like a Shakespearean drama. With each sentence, her confidence burgeoned, nudging aside her earlier doubts. And here, she gestured to a page, the recurring theme of power dynamics. Caesar's rise wasn't merely due to military prowess or charisma, it was rooted in strategic manipulation of perspectives, much like my own experience. A ripple of intrigue swept through the group as they mulled over the correlations she drew. As she spoke, Claire glimpsed the varying reactions: fascination from some, skepticism from others. The tension brought forth dents of uncertainty. Would they dismiss her connection to Caesar's narrative as a reach? She could feel her pulse quicken, wonder dancing with fear in the corners of her consciousness. Then Daniel's voice soared above the murmurs. That's a brilliant observation, Claire. The dualities of character and perception you're tapping into hold such relevance today. His endorsement washed over her like sunlight striking frost, dissolving the icy grip of hesitation that had clung to her resolve. But the approval felt fleeting and fragile. It hit her that this moment, electrifying as it was only the beginning, and vulnerability lurked just out of sight, waiting to pounce. What if they turned against her once the initial intrigue waned? Alongside these revelations, she pushed forth, determination coursing through her veins. I've dealt with an unfair appropriation of my work, stealing not just my ideas but the essence of who I am as an academic. The admission felt like baring her soul, a raw rupture of the facade she had constructed. As those words dropped into the silence, a tension arose that retreated into an indiscernible longing for resolution. Faces shifted, questions began to brew, and a murmur of agreement circled through the group. Yet, lurking doubts threatened to claw at her. Would they stand by her side, or would the academic envy resurface and leave her standing alone? As she prepared for the questions and judgments that would inevitably follow, the weight of the manuscript in her grasp reminded Claire that reclaiming her narrative was imperative. This was not simply about Caesar, nor just her manuscript, it was about her identity as a scholar ready to confront the shadows of convention and expectation. The room felt charged, an electrical pulse that promised transformation. Would she find allies in this moment of revelation, or would it culminate in isolation, squashed under the weight of institutional biases? Claire steeled herself against the uncertainties brewing, but the stakes had already risen. The outcome of this endeavor held more than personal significance, it was a defining chapter of her burgeoning legacy. Standing tall, she prepared to navigate through the impending storm of discourse, knowing that her journey forward hinged precariously on this very moment of truth. Could she turn this fleeting chance into a foundation for a resounding, authentic voice? The looming question hung heavy as she awaited her peers' reactions, their thoughts morphing into unpredictable threads that might weave together a future she fervently yearned to embrace. A palpable silence permeated the room as Claire stood at the epicenter of her own emergence, yet her heart thudded with both exhilaration and fear. Responses swirled like leaves caught in a tempest. Would their acceptance buoy her further, or would skepticism batter her once again? The first question arose from a professor known for her biting critiques, a woman whose reputation for dismantling ideas was enshrined in departmental legend. Interesting connections you've made, Claire. But how do you justify projecting modern power dynamics onto an ancient figure like Caesar? Isn't it a dangerous simplification that might undermine the richness of historical context? Claire's pulse quickened. It would be easy for dismissal to flicker in the eyes of the audience, easily spinning into a counterproductive debate. But she could sense the growing embers of courage smoldering within her, she wouldn't let a lonely voice drown her own. While our times differ, the human experience, the pursuit of power, influence, perception remains consistent, she replied, her voice steadied by determination. I believe it's critical to establish connections, history isn't merely a series of events, but a tapestry of narratives that shape identity. Daniel's approving nod fueled her decision to stand firm. Yet, from the corner of her eye, she caught the professor's slight scowl, a reminder that not all critics would embrace her rationale. Claire knew instinctively that despite her growing confidence, she needed to tread carefully through this intellectual minefield. Next, a peer voiced what Claire dreaded most, "But do you really expect your insights to challenge established literature? Isn't this just a vulnerable moment fed by your personal frustrations?" The question dripped with incredulity, twisting the knife directly into her psyche. Claire's instinct was to retreat, to cower beneath the weight of ridicule that often came with academia. Remembering the unfairness she had faced in the past, the stealing of her ideas, the moments she had been overlooked, she refused to yield. "No, this was different. It's not just a reflection of my frustrations," she retorted, leaning into the vulnerability that had once weakened her. "It's about owning my voice and presenting an alternative perspective that intrigues me. Isn't that what scholarship demands? The courage to confront our biases?" Gasps erupted, and she caught Daniel's eyes again, sparkling with encouragement. Gradually, she noticed nods of agreement mingling with skepticism. Each individual had their own narrative thread entwined within the academic cloth, and perhaps, just perhaps, she could offer a new pattern. As the questions danced and transformed into spirited discussions, Claire realized she could navigate this tempest, drawing strength from the collective discourse. Each word was a step toward unraveling her identity anew, a scholar fighting for her truth. Yet, in the back of her mind, shadows flickered. Would this solidarity last? A sudden confrontation with doubt tightened claw-like around her heart. Was she truly prepared for the backlash of detractors, once the excitement of this revelation dimmed? The fear of isolation threatened to bubble over again, yet now, she found it simmering beneath an evolving will. The meeting continued to unfold, questions morphing into dialogues that revitalized Claire's spirit. Ideas exchanged sparked new neurons in her brain, illuminating conflicting perspectives and unraveling her misgivings. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was a storm brewing on the horizon, an intersection of her personal revelations and her academic reputation, teetering on the cusp of a new reality. As the discussion reached a crescendo, she wondered whether she had created allies among her peers or merely stirred the embers preparing to ignite. The stakes had shifted, confrontation with her adversaries was inevitable. The journey towards an unassailable academic voice beckoned, but lurking behind every revelation was the question of how deeply she was willing to dive into her own narrative. With her thoughts unraveling like a tapestry now disconnected yet urging to weave together again, Claire braced herself. The time had come to face a pivotal decision: embrace the storm, or retreat. But as the assembled thoughts and discussions spiraled, the undeniable truth lay ahead: with her newfound allies or not, the battle for her academic and personal legacy was just beginning. With a lingering hum of vibrant dialogue still echoing in her ears, Claire left the room, the weight of her own words hovering like a blade. The questions posed had pricked at her vulnerabilities, yet also illuminated unknown corners of her intellect she had yet to explore. She had faced the skepticism with defiance, but now, as she walked down the corridor, the pulse of anxiety revived, racing to match the newfound courage she had wielded only moments before. Amidst the cacophony of her thoughts, a new dilemma emerged. Claire felt the necessity of recalibrating her argument, of recognizing not only the power of her own narrative but also the pre-existing structures of academia that could potentially strangle it. Would her fresh perspective be accepted, or would it be quashed, deemed irrelevant? Her emerging confidence began to crack under the enormity of those questions. In her office, surrounded by stacks of books and papers, she took a deep breath, conjuring forth her thoughts like layers of mist rising at dawn. The desire to produce a work that could resonate, inspire, and challenge the status quo ignited within her. But to do so, she had to confront the harsh reality of systemic inertia. The scholars deeply rooted in tradition were not to be swayed lightly. Claire sat down and opened her laptop. As her fingers navigated the keyboard, she began drafting a letter to Daniel, whose supportive presence had kindled the fire in her. She needed him to understand the depth of her resolve moving forward. The stakes had shifted, she could not simply float by with ideas disguised as essays. She envisioned a more robust defense of her thesis, one that would directly confront the established discourse with powerful references and empirical evidence. But even as she crafted this letter, fragments of doubt seeped into her psyche. The looming confrontation with dissenters like the critical professor was unavoidable. Would she remain steadfast when pushed into a corner, or would her confidence collapse like a poorly constructed argument? Claire paused, wrestling with the fear of failure that had threatened her throughout her academic journey. Glaring at the screen, she wrestled with these spiraling thoughts. This wasn't merely about fighting for a grade or a commendation, this was about shaping her professional identity. The vision of herself as an emerging scholar began to crystallize in her mind. The illuminating pathway was riddled with obstacles, yet it was precisely those obstacles that would sculpt her into the academic she aspired to become. Motivated by this realization, she closed the letter without sending it. Instead, she would forge ahead with her ideas, shaping them into something unassailable. Each moment spent contemplating her next steps also presented an opportunity to discover latent strengths: her command over narrative constructs, her ability to challenge existing frameworks, and her capability to evoke empathy in her readers. Suddenly, Claire's phone buzzed insistently. It was a message from Daniel, an invite to a panel discussion featuring prominent scholars in their field. The timing felt fortuitous but potentially intimidating. What more could it take for her to confront these intellectual titans? The idea of attending sent a shiver of trepidation down her spine, but also ignited a flicker of intrigue. Should she go, fully aware that each interaction would be laden with opportunities to refine her voice? The panel would discuss themes critical to her argument, such insights might empower her own burgeoning contrarian views. It was a risk, but one that could elevate her narrative. As she weighed the merits, an inner voice clamored for recognition, the one that insisted she embrace the challenge. Stepping into their arena could mean more than validation, it could signify a personal victory over her own haunting self-doubts. With resolve settling in her gut, Claire decided, she would attend. As she looked out the window, catching the autumn leaves spiraling gracefully to the ground, she felt an unexpected thrill, bolstering her spirit. The storm loomed closer, but rather than fear, she felt the stirrings of readiness. No longer merely standing on the precipice of her story, Claire felt poised to leap into the fray. But as she gathered her notes and prepared for the panel, a disquieting thought emerged: what truths would she uncover about herself amidst the confrontation, and would the raw honesty she planned to present only serve to unravel the carefully woven fabric of her academic existence? The moment of disclosure was fast approaching, and with it, the chance to confront both her audience and herself. The day of the panel discussion arrived, enveloped in an air of electric anticipation. Claire woke early, unable to shake the restless energy coursing through her veins. The sunlight streamed through her window, casting playful shadows against the walls, yet it was the shadow of self-doubt that lingered intently in the back of her mind. Would the intellectual heavyweights of the panel take her seriously? The thought of being dismissed threatened to unravel the tenuous confidence she had painstakingly pieced together. As she dressed, Claire selected her outfit carefully, opting for a tailored blazer that gave her an edge of authority. Each item of clothing was a signal to herself, a small armor in preparation for the battle ahead. In the mirror, she practiced her introduction, her voice steadying as she spoke her own name. Who was this person in the reflection? Someone determined, she realized, a scholar willing to risk exposure for the sake of authenticity. Arriving at the venue, the vibrancy around her was palpable. Scholars, students, and casual attendees mingled, their conversations limitless and, at times, steeped in complexity that left her feeling lost. Still, Claire pressed onward, reminding herself of the intellectual pursuit that brought her here, not just to be an observer but to contribute her voice to the larger dialogue. Once seated, she scanned the panelists, seasoned scholars, each radiating confidence and authority. A knot formed in her stomach as she recognized Dr. Hamilton, the very professor whose dismissive critique haunted her thoughts. Her instinct was to retreat, to sink into anonymity, but the resolute vision of her own journey compelled her to stay. As the discussion began, the panelists spoke eloquently, tossing around theories and references that set her mind ablaze with ideas. Claire found herself furiously scribbling notes, her thoughts racing with insights that challenged the very foundations they presented. Yet every time she poised to raise her hand, that insidious voice of doubt re-emerged, festering with questions of her worth. What did she know, really? Would she be able to stand firm when scrutinized? When it was finally her turn to ask a question, Claire took a deep breath. Her heart pounded in her ears as she structured her thoughts into an articulate inquiry related to her thesis. The panel paused, expressions flickering between acknowledgement and surprise. It was as if in that moment, she had cracked open a door, and though the shadows behind it loomed large, the light showed her path. After offering her question, she felt the next wave of adrenaline surge. The nuances of their responses sparked a fire inside her. The dichotomy of their arguments against her blossoming ideas ignited a fierce determination to push back, to assert her perspective amidst their silence. Engaging with Dr. Hamilton became both a challenge and an awakening. He undercut her stance with habitual skepticism as she stood, trembling yet resolute, in the face of his critique. The initial fear she harbored morphed into clarity as she sharpened her arguments in real time. The conversation became a dance of ideas, and just as she thought she had found her groove, Claire experienced a jarring realization. Her voice bore the weight of an entire narrative, a confrontation of not only the panelists but an intrinsic struggle within herself. In that realization, she discovered an essential truth: the act of revealing herself, her thoughts, her fears, was herself an act of profound scholarship. When the session concluded, attendees filtered out, but she remained seated, gathering her storm of thoughts. The moment was dizzying. She had faced her fears, solidified her identity as an emerging scholar, and dared to rebut established thoughts that had long clouded the field. Driven to connect post-panel, Claire searched for Daniel amid the slowly dissipating crowd. She needed to share this empowering experience, to express how confronting Dr. Hamilton had stripped away layers of apprehension, revealing not just a scholar in her, but a fierce advocate for her ideas. Yet, as she turned to exit, the sharp sound of a chair scraping against the floor caught her attention. It was another academic, one of the panelists, beckoning to her with intrigue written across their features. What could they want? Was it an invitation to discuss her perspective further, or perhaps an entirely different challenge altogether? Claire's heart raced again, poised for yet another opportunity to forge ahead. The academic's presence loomed larger as they approached, eyes keen with interest. Claire braced herself, heart thumping against her ribs, unsure of what to expect. Would this conversation pay homage to her newfound confidence, or would it unravel like a poorly woven thread? She could feel the palpable tension in the air, a moment that teetered between recognition and judgment. Claire, right? The academic's voice was warm, inviting. I was captivated by your question today. I haven't encountered such a fresh perspective in a while. The words carried a weight that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Would this be a conversation that could propel her forward, or merely a fleeting encounter? Thank you, Claire replied, her voice steadier than she felt. I'm just trying to contribute something meaningful. Meaningful indeed. Their eyes sparkled with curiosity. I'm Dr. Sanders. Let us discuss your ideas further. I believe you have a voice that deserves to be heard. The invitation ignited a sense of urgency within Claire. Here it was a chance to delve deeper, to solidify her standing as a scholar. Yet, the flicker of self-doubt crept back in. Did she really have what it took to engage in a meaningful dialogue with someone of Dr. Sanders' caliber? They retreated to a quieter corner of the venue, the noise of departing guests fading into a muffled backdrop. Claire was acutely aware of the moment. This wasn't just a conversation, it was a pivotal point in her professional journey. What you challenged today with the panel, it's a profound departure from established theories, Dr. Sanders began, leaning forward, engrossed. What inspires your research? This was a moment of revelation, a crossroads of her academic identity. Claire took a breath, letting the words flow as she explored her motivations. I've always believed that the prevailing narratives in our field need revisiting. We tend to overlook alternative perspectives, especially from fresh voices. I've seen how much more nuanced discussions can become when all angles are considered. Dr. Sanders nodded, excitement illuminating their gaze. Precisely. It's fantastic to see someone willing to take risks in their scholarship. You should consider submitting a paper for an upcoming symposium. Your insights could be invaluable. The idea sparked a whirlwind of thoughts. A paper? It felt daunting, an oppressive shadow of expectation hovered over her, bringing questions of her capability to the forefront. Could she transform the fervor igniting her conversations with Dr. Sanders into something concrete? Do you really think my ideas are worthy of that? The question slipped from her lips unwittingly, vulnerability creeping back into her voice. Dr. Sanders' response was immediate, firm. Absolutely. You have the spirit of an innovator. Don't let self-doubt deter you. Remember what you accomplished today standing up to the established scholars. That's rare. Your voice matters. His words resonated with the need for authenticity that had begun to solidify within Claire. Yet the fear still festered, urging her to retreat into familiar shadows. What if she failed? What if her ideas, once penned, simply echoed her doubts rather than amplifying her voice? As they continued their conversation, Dr. Sanders shared insights about the submission process, encouraging Claire to harness her momentum. Each piece of advice was akin to fortifying armor for the battle that lay ahead. She realized that seeking validation wouldn't suffocate her fears but instead could pave a path toward growth. Amidst the exchange, Claire couldn't shake the thought of Dr. Hamilton's potent skepticism. Confronting him had spurred her forward, but would she always need opposition to fuel her ascension? By the end of their discussion, Claire felt a change coursing through her, a cocktail of excitement and trepidation. As she promised to consider the submission, she couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that emerged. Was she ready to step fully into her role as a scholar, to embrace the weight of her narrative? But before she could ponder the answer, Dr. Sanders leaned in closer, a subtle intensity shrouding their next remark. I think you're on the cusp of something groundbreaking. But know that major shifts often come with confrontation. Are you prepared for the challenges that lie ahead? With those words, Claire felt a new tension rising within her, a challenge that threatened to push her beyond her comfort zone, beckoning her to summon the fierce advocate she had just begun to recognize. The stakes were increasing, and as the discussion concluded, a quiet resolve enveloped her, igniting a yearning to confront not just external doubts, but the deeper echoes that stirred within. As she stepped back into the bustling venue, the flicker of possibility illuminated her path anew. What lay ahead, she pondered, determined to find out. Claire spent the next few days oscillating between exhilaration and dread. The clarity of Dr. Sanders' encouragement lingered in her mind like a haunting melody. Should she submit a paper? The thought simultaneously thrilled and paralyzed her. Every time she sat at her desk, a sprawling blank document stared back, reflecting her interior chaos. She couldn't escape the mental tug-of-war that unfolded daily. Her hands itched to write, but the weight of expectation loomed ever larger. What if her voice was not as unique as she believed? What if the ideas she wanted to share crumbled under scrutiny? In these moments, self-doubt morphed into an uncomfortable companion, whispering that she was merely a novice on the brink of exposure. But there was a flicker of determination, an ember she dared to fan into a flame. Each time she recalled Dr. Sanders' words, a new sense of urgency enveloped her. It was time to merge her evolving insights with action, to transition from passive contemplation to active creation. Days passed, and with them, the deadlines for the symposium submission loomed closer. Procrastination would no longer serve her ambition. She took a deep breath and opened her laptop once again, ready to confront the mounting doubts. She started with an outline, bullet points coating the page. I'll focus on alternative narratives, she whispered, as if speaking aloud could lend her the courage she sought. I need to challenge established theories. Each point began to reflect her unique perspective, an assurance forming as her thoughts crystallized into tangible arguments. Weeks of reflection had imparted rich nuances to her ideas, and she could see an outline emerging, an intricate web that could challenge the status quo. Yet, as momentum built, Claire felt the looming specter of criticism draw near. Just as her resolve crystallized, unwanted memories of Dr. Hamilton's dismissive gaze resurfaced. Could she genuinely shake off his doubts? The thought weighed heavily on her mind. She wondered if confronting him again might yield more clarity. That afternoon, she decided to reach out. Mustering her courage, she sent him a direct email, requesting a meeting. As she hit send, she experienced a rush liberation fighting against the weight of anxiety. Perhaps the worth of her ideas did not hinge solely on their acceptance. What if her willingness to challenge opposition spoke volumes about her growth? Ruminating on this possibility, she ventured back to her work with renewed vigor, daring to imagine a powerful defense built around her alternatives. As Claire poured herself into her research, she delighted in disruptive ideas sparking new connections, never knowing how those deliberations would reflect her growth as an academic. Days of writing sessions transformed into nights brimming with endless notes, raw materials that echoed her commitment to unraveling established beliefs. But the closer she got to her goal, the more fragmented her thoughts became. Each time she sat down, those pernicious doubts clawed at her resolve. Should anyone take her seriously? Was she ready to declare her voice among towering intellects? One late night, unable to sleep, Claire found herself at the office desk, staring blankly at her screen. She closed her eyes, allowing the voices of her inner critics to swarm her thoughts. Her heart raced as she questioned whether this internal battle would ever silence. Then, an illuminating thought emerged: perhaps she need not dispel the doubts entirely. What if she could transform them into fuel? Instead of viewing them as insurmountable obstacles, could they become her motivators? With a deep breath, Claire opened her laptop again, determined to shape her fears into something tangible. That moment sparked a profound shift, an internal decision echoing Dr. Sanders' insights: confrontation lies not only outside her, but within herself. It was time to dig deep, to tackle the skepticism that often felt paralyzing. As she placed fingers on keys and words poured forth, she felt the world outside fade away. Every thought crystallized into sentences, shaping not a mere paper but a declaration, a stand in her journey. But just as she felt the momentum solidify, an imperceptible chill crept through her resolve. What if her burgeoning confidence faltered when faced with actual criticism? Tomorrow, she would confront Dr. Hamilton. He would serve as a mirror, an uncomfortable reflection of her doubts, yet a crucial test for the path she was forging. As her stomach fluttered with trepidation, she recognized one undeniable truth: she was ready to step into the arena. And she would emerge either victorious or transformed, yet irrevocably a part of the scholarly discourse she once feared. Would facing Dr. Hamilton bring clarity, or would it shatter the burgeoning faith she was beginning to forge? Claire stared at the calendar, bright red ink marking the impending appointment with Dr. Hamilton. Her heart raced, syncing with the ebb and flow of her apprehensive thoughts as she reflected on the conversation that awaited her. This meeting was not merely a discussion, it represented the crossroads of her academic journey. She would either emerge with newfound resilience or be left grappling with her insecurities. As the day approached, Claire cultivated patience and resolve to prepare meticulously. She dug deeper into her research on alternative narratives, each abstract and piece of literature holding the promise of fortifying her argument. It wasn't enough to simply present her ideas, she had to anticipate objections. A sharpened perspective would not only bolster her case, but it might even stabilize her wavering confidence. With every outline she revised, Claire crafted defenses against imagined criticisms based on Dr. Hamilton's past remarks. This visualization of potential rebuttals transformed from a source of fear into a tactical exercise. She rehearsed articulating her core message until it flowed seamlessly from her lips. Each time she muttered phrases under her breath, they morphed from whispered insecurities into powerful affirmations of her capability. However, the closer she got to the meeting, the more intense her anxiety bubbled beneath her composed surface. She questioned her merits, the weight of each presumed judgment amplifying her internal dialogue. Was her research genuinely innovative, or just a recycled notion in a sea of scholarly voices? On the eve of her confrontation, Claire sank into her chair, fingers poised above the keyboard, reflecting on what this critical discourse with Dr. Hamilton truly meant. It was about validation, yes, but more importantly, it was a validation of herself. Taking a deep breath, she decided to confront her doubts head-on. Typing furiously, she poured her reflection onto the page, detailing her academic aspirations, her diligent research efforts, and the courage she mustered to defend her viewpoints. The act of laying bare her thoughts honored not just her ambitions but marked a forward step in her journey. While revising her outline one final time, Claire found herself peering into the depths of her motivations. She was no longer merely a shyer version of herself, she was evolving. Her commitment to challenge established theories stood acknowledged and, after years of hearing differing opinions, she began to define her role within this complex academic landscape. Morning dawned bright with opportunity as she, presentable and ready, sat nervously outside Dr. Hamilton's office. Each tick of the clock echoed in her ears, amplifying the weight of what lay ahead. She practiced the mantra she had chiseled from her writings. It reminded her to believe in the validity of her voice. Finally, the door swung open, revealing the stoic figure of Dr. Hamilton. "Claire, please come in," he beckoned, a neutral tone draped over his invitation. Gathering her strength, she stepped over the threshold. As she seated herself, the rush of confidence rushed back in waves, mingling with the remnants of her trepidation. This was her moment, this was where her labor of love would be weighed and measured. "Dr. Hamilton," she began, setting the tone for the forthcoming dialogue. "I appreciate you meeting with me. I've been reflecting on alternative narratives within our field, and I'd like to challenge some of the prevailing theories." Each word she uttered came with intention. She was no longer a mere participant but a contender in the academic arena. The ensuing conversation danced between tension and intellect, opening opportunities for both insight and critique. As Dr. Hamilton leaned forward, his expression unreadable, and she felt a shift in the air. How he responded could either buoy her spirits or summon her doubts into clarity. With her heart pounding like a marching drum, Claire suddenly realized she stood at the precipice, ready to confront her doubts and perhaps redefine her place in this scholarly discourse. But as Dr. Hamilton opened his mouth to speak, the line dividing affirmation from defeat shimmered perilously close. Would the critique deepen her understanding, or would it send her spiraling back into self-doubt? In this critical moment, Claire prepared for the challenge that lay ahead, knowing this was not only about defense, this was a decisive moment. Little did she know, an unexpected revelation would soon emerge, putting everything she thought she understood about her research and herself to the ultimate test. The meeting with Dr. Hamilton began with tension, her voice steadier than she expected as she outlined her perspective on alternative narratives. Claire carefully articulated her premise, that understanding historical figures like Julius Caesar required a nuanced lens, one that could bridge past and present. She felt her passion simmering as she continued to speak, each phrase sharpening her argument. Dr. Hamilton interjected, his brow furrowing slightly. "Your assertion seems ambitious, Claire. But ambition without a foundation risks oversimplification. How do you plan on substantiating these claims against established scholars?" Claire took a deep breath. The weight of his scrutiny hung heavy, but instead of retreating into doubt, she leaned into the moment. The historical narrative isn't static, it's a living document that shapes and is shaped by contemporary discourse. I've analyzed recent scholarship and contrasted these ideas with primary texts, revealing layers that previous scholars may have neglected. I believe my approach can add a beneficial complexity to the existing framework. Dr. Hamilton's demeanor softened marginally, yet skepticism remained. "You're touching upon complexities, but complexity requires rigorous defense. Do you anticipate that your interpretations might encourage further debate or merely stir controversy?" The question echoed Claire's fears, the doubt circling like vultures above. She steadied herself, recalling the night spent consolidating her ideas and the electrifying discussion with Dr. Sanders. I acknowledge that controversy is inherent in new scholarship, but isn't that the catalyst for growth. I want to spark discussion, not simply add a voice to the noise. Engaging critically is essential for academia to evolve. For a moment, silence enveloped them. Dr. Hamilton leaned back, processing her words while Claire felt her pulse quicken in anticipation. Would this be where perseverance led? Would she find validation in vulnerability? Your perspective has potential, he conceded cautiously, though the edge in his tone hinted at his reservations. However, it will demand an unwavering commitment to your research. You must prepare for resistance inquiries designed to dismantle your arguments. I'm ready, Claire replied with resolve. This journey is less about avoiding opposition and more about embracing it as a pathway to authenticity. My goal is not mere acceptance, but the evolution of discourse. Fleeting expressions of surprise flitted across his face, and Claire sensed the shift. This conversation had shifted from defense to negotiation, a doorway opened for her to claim her place. Yet, apprehension lingered. What if she faltered when faced with the skepticism of her peers, much like she had the first time? Dr. Hamilton cut through her whirl of thoughts. As an academic, you will always tread the thin line between conventional wisdom and radical thought. Remember, though respect is essential, it must be earned by building intellectual credibility. You acknowledge that, correct? Claire nodded firmly, fully aware that earning this respect would require courage and armed knowledge. All I need is an opportunity to demonstrate that my voice carries weight, that my insights can challenge and refine existing frameworks. Fine, Dr. Hamilton said, his tone transitioning. Consider submitting your work to the symposium after you finalize your arguments and incorporate the early critiques. It could be a significant chance, but only if you're prepared. A wave of relief washed over Claire. This was the moment validation shifted from a distant aspiration to an impending reality. Thank you, Dr. Hamilton. I will ensure my work reflects the honor of this opportunity. With their conversations ending, she rose from her seat, a newfound assurance vibrating throughout her system. Her heart raced, not from fear but from exhilarating possibility. She recognized that this was not merely a fleeting moment, it was a pivotal turning point. As she left his office, Claire felt like she was shedding the weight of the past. No longer was she just the person her father defined her as or the echo of her insecurities. She had claimed her insistence on authenticity, drawing from her studies and inspiration. Her voice would echo through academia, and for the first time, she envisioned it not just as an artisan carving through stone but as a sculptor crafting monuments of thought, a legacy all her own. With each decision and conversation, she had grown into her identity. No longer filling a role in the shadow of expectations, Claire embraced her rightful place as a scholar with insights worth sharing. The manuscript was not just a tool, it became her armor in the academic arena. Finally, at the symposium, Claire would showcase not just a paper but her journey, a testament to her evolution as an academic poised to challenge conventions, to provoke thought and inspire dialogue. As she prepared, clarity emerged, she was ready to embrace the complexities of her narrative. One thing remained crystal clear: she was done with fear, resolved to earn her place through authenticity and courage. This was her narrative. This was her moment. The door to her future was open, and as she stepped through, she was unequivocally the architect of her own destiny. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now, this is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.